Hello and welcome to this Gluware webinar highlighting our 4.3 release that just came out in the second week of May. This webinar is titled 7 Transformational Benefits Network RPA Delivers, as Network RPA being the focus and kind of the big rock delivery in our a new application in our suite of applications with Gluware. So I'm Michael Howe, VP of Product Marketing, and let's jump into it. So an agenda for today's session is a very brief overview or intro into Gluware, just to make sure you have context in terms of what Gluware offers, and then get into the new 4.3 release with the focus being on Network RPA. Then we'll highlight the 7 transformational benefits, and I have several live demos I'm going to show you today, including the basics, and then Network RPA with external integrations, leveraging our integration with StackStorm that has a whole host of other apps that we integrate with Ansible, Amazon Web Services, Jira, Slack, and more. And then we're going to show you how we can even build custom tasks in a low-code environment like Gluware Lab. So let's move on into the content. So what we want to kind of share with you first is that if you haven't been able to keep up and see it, we've had several reports come out, starting from this one that came out actually the very end of the year 2021. We published on our website in January of 2022, which is the GigOhm radar report for net DevOps. So the first, or say the inaugural report on this topic, say it's a very big topic and a very big theme. I invite you to grab this piece of research and read it. Gluware is very pleased and honored to get really the leadership position in this report around the only outperformer and fast mover in this category. So I encourage you to read the report and understand what net DevOps is. And we're going to talk about it quite a bit in this session today. Another important report that dropped just a few months ago was the Market Guide for Network Automation from Gartner. So we are featuring reprints of that on our website as well. So you can hit our webpage and navigate to it, or just go to this URL you see here and download that report. Gartner is also highlighting the importance of net DevOps and how the movement towards kind of enabling CI/CD pipeline or approach to build, test, deploy, and monitor and continue that cycle is really important with no-code and low-code solutions. So please give that a read. Another one we'll highlight is that EMA produced a really great report on the future of data center network automation, and just highlighting where there's been progress in the data center automation, there is still a long way to go. And so check out this report. And the author Seamus McGillicuddy also provided for us an excellent blog that is featured on our website and EMA's as well, that highlights how Gluware is so unique in our ability to help you advance and accelerate the automation of your data center. So one quick highlight on Gluware, and that I want you to think of Gluware as a software layer. We are a pure software solution. We run on compute that can be in the cloud or on-prem, highly scalable and reliable solution that's critical when you look at the large enterprise needs and requirements. Gluware is built to be multi-vendor, multi-domain, which means the LAN, WAN, data center, campus. We've also enabled automation of cloud. You'll see a little bit of that today, but it's not the focus of this session today. The Gluware orchestration engine is intent-based. That means we give the ability to declare the desired state, and our automation engine operates in a declarative manner, meaning we're going to interrogate what's there and then make the moves, adds, changes required automatically for you to end up in the desired state. And then it's closed loop. We're going to verify that we stay in that desired state. Another term you'll hear when describing Gluware is idempotent. That just means that it's programmatic in the way that every time you execute an operation in Gluware, you're going to get the same result. We're not just firing up a script and pushing commands in a kind of a blind manner. We're doing a very rigorous and involved process, as I was talking about when I was mentioning that we're declarative. And so by running and using Gluware for network automation, you get very repeatable and scalable results. And it's not just about, let's say, day one or just pushing an initial configuration. In fact, a high percentage of what Gluware is used for is not just config changes. It's inventorying the network and discovering the network and auditing the network and drift monitoring the network, and then automating and implementing ongoing changes. So tuning QoS and maintaining access lists and DNS records, and many, many other things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. And as we build off this base, you're going to see how Network RPA is highly complementary in the base functionality that the Gluware application suite delivers. So with that, let's talk real quickly about that application suite. And now we're kind of referring to it as the packaged automation. Some people also use the term like out-of-the-box applications. And this is really a key benefit because when you look at automation approaches today, generally enterprises are in three categories. They're doing things manually, which is mostly on CLI. They've attempted scripting and build your own and cobble together open source, which can be viable. However, build your own automation and leveraging open source is a tremendous undertaking. You got to ramp up on your skill set. You got to essentially become a developer. You got to maintain that code. You got to test the code. It is a huge undertaking, and even the largest organizations that we've been working with, the Fortune 50, have found it to be really difficult. And so you can see how even much smaller organizations don't really want to take on that challenge of DIY automation and really make it scalable and at enterprise grade, right? So which means you're operating hundreds or thousands of automated operations when you're performing drifts and audits and network changes. So that's kind of the point of out of the box, or is that you have packaged automation that delivers value really quickly. Our large customers are getting to ROIs within 6 months. So just running through that, Device Manager is kind of generally the starting point in our app suite. You can discover your network. Device Manager performs a really deep interrogation of the devices to pull all their details. Then you have that base set of knowledge of what am I going to automate, because we're ingesting the device and the version and the serial number, and we're ingesting the configuration, and we're even ingesting a lot of the operational state details as well. So Device Manager is that starting point of ingesting the existing network. Then most customers move on to our config, drift, and audit and OS Manager applications. This is where you're monitoring your network for config change, and with syslog integration, you can know exactly who made the change and when, and even remediate. We're going to look at some use cases around that with Network RPA. Audit is extremely important in terms of maintaining compliance and abiding by regulatory rules and policies that are in place. So again, we'll build off that in this session. OS Manager is a really critical app in terms of what Gluware delivers, because inevitably you're going to have to be upgrading your routers, switches, firewalls, load balancers. You're going to have to be updating the code on those. Vulnerabilities and bugs and the need for new features always come up. And instead of maybe upgrading every 3 or 4 years, most large enterprises are having to upgrade 2 and 3 times a year minimum to keep up with those bugs and vulnerabilities that ultimately are discovered in the vendor's operating systems. In the next category, these are 2 of, let's say, the newer suite of applications. Dashboard was introduced in Gluware 4.0, which is a little over a year ago. And Data Explorer followed it. I believe it was 4.1 or 4.2. Dashboard gives you the visualization of the underlying data of your network. Data Explorer gives you the ability to take that data and build it into any report. Moving on into the intent-based configuration management. This is where let's say the superpower of Gluware is in what we call config modeling. It's an application that enables to treat your network like code, or we implement infrastructure as code, even if you really have no coding skills. So config modeling enables the ability to ingest the network configs and build policy out of your configuration. And we deconstruct that configuration and those policies so you can automate, a handful of things like SNMP and DNS and Banner, or you can automate network-wide, very difficult architectures like EVP and VXLAN, for example. So config modeling is very, very powerful. And once users start to use it and realize the benefit and the power of it, they really come to appreciate the benefit of that approach to network automation. And we'll see a little bit of that. This is not focused on the app in this go around. And then we have a legacy component that we're building off of in Network RPA, but we have something called workflows. And really, this is more pre-built, wizard-oriented tasks that can be built into the application. And we call those workflows, but we now have a new generation of workflows enabled through Network RPA, which we're going to get into. So building off that app suite, right, which is great because you get a lot of functionality out of the box, and generally folks are automating, the day they implement Gluware, they're performing many of these automations. And within 60 to 90 days, they're essentially using the full application suite. Then there always comes a point where maybe there's something custom needed, some extension, some custom integration. And this is where Gluware Lab comes into play as a low-code capability that our customers can use. And an IDE, it's a full-blown IDE built on Eclipse framework. This is what Gluware uses to develop all of our capability. And this is now, it has been available to our customer base to leverage that. So not every customer has the capability or the interest in leveraging something like Gluware Lab, but those that do, it really opens up the platform, and you can get into the data modeling, and you can get into the custom business logic and build off that. So it's really powerful for those that embrace it. So starting to introduce Network RPA, and this is where, from just setting the stage, this is where kind of the progression is, in that you have suite of applications, you have the ability to customize, but to really take things to the next level, it's about process automation, automating the full end-to-end task or set of tasks an operations engineer or a network engineer has to complete. This might involve, opening a ticket in ServiceNow, or requesting an address from an IPAM, or posting something in Jira, or, the list goes on and on, because you're managing your network in a multi-vendor network, and you have multiple things in the management plane. You have security related threats and notifications, you have monitoring, you have all of these things happening in the management plane. And so when you look at automation, if you're only limited to task-based automation, you're not automating the whole process, and therefore you're still pretty inefficient. Gluware Network RPA delivers the ability to drag and drop and enable no-code process building, and makes it easy to implement integrations and external capabilities. And we're going to talk at length about that. Starting here with one of the first things that we did with Network RPA was we decided to onboard StackStorm formally as an integration package. And what StackStorm gives us is, through the StackStorm Exchange, there's over 150 API integrations. So this was extremely useful, because you may know we announced Gluware Network RPA at Onug Spring. When Onug Spring came around, we had some opportunities to implement some automation as part of the working groups. One of them required some tactical automation with AWS. And for other use cases, we wanted to implement Jira or Slack or other things. And StackStorm brings us that capability already built and packaged. And so while Gluware will be building out our native API integrations, we have out-of-the-box integration with StackStorm that delivers over 150, ready-to-go integrations. So for those of you already implementing StackStorm, Gluware now essentially orchestrates StackStorm. And another key enabler here is that part of the StackStorm Exchange is Ansible. And so we had a use case where we wanted to use Ansible playbooks for validation of Gluware automation, and we're able to do that. And you'll see that use case here today. So really opens up the potential capabilities and the use cases around how you use Gluware and how you automate processes end to end. And that's really the theme today as we move forward. So let's jump right into it. That first slide really did start to introduce Network RPA. This is the key, let's say, kind of marketing slide that we've generated around announcing what it is. It's about automating in minutes, not months. That is really talking about the fact that it's no code. And when there are tasks already built, you just drag and drop those tasks into the canvas. You can build out logical operators. You can test and integrate your full process of what is being referred to as net DevOps, where you build, you test, you then, once it's good, you're comfortable with it, you can promote it to production. And then from running it in production, you monitor it, and then you continue to iterate. And I think that's the key to automation, is that you're never done with automation. You're always continuing to build out automation for the things you do. And with that, one of the most powerful things is for existing Gluware users that are already using Device Manager, Drift and Audit, and Config Modeling and others. Now they have the ability to really automate the automation, or orchestrate, more accurately, orchestrate the automation and perform also those third-party integrations that we talked about. And you're going to see many of those use cases. So just to hit the summary across the bottom, Gartner has really been one of the key analysts out there to highlight the term hyperautomation. And we're not going to cover it in like great detail here, but hyperautomation is about really getting to the point where you can enable your automation extremely rapidly within your organization, and that you have a strategy in your organization that is implementing things like low code, no code, which is what Gluware is, leveraging packaged automation, which obviously Gluware is delivering, and leveraging process automation is a key component as well. And that's exactly what Gluware Network RPA is all about. And that second kind of bullet there around pre-built automated tasks, this is, again, the no-code component is that you have this library of tasks from our underlying application suite, and then through the StackStorm integration, each pack that you enable or turn on with StackStorm implements dozens or hundreds of additional tasks that you have. And so all that is no code. However, with Gluware Lab, you even have the ability of low code, of extending and adding your own custom tasks. And we're going to look at that. The third key area here is that Gluware continues to expand our native support for vendor operating systems. This is really key because Gluware is not automating or orchestrating where we're having to sit on top of something else like a script or like Ansible or other things for the majority of what we're automating. We have over 40 vendor operating systems that Gluware natively integrates with. And the key component around that is that when Gluware is natively doing it, you can be reassured that we're implementing declarative provisioning. It's idempotent, it's highly scalable, highly reliable, and you have deep visibility all the way down to the CLI or API as to what Gluware is doing. So when you have challenges or problems, especially in the development phases, you're not having to figure out the kind of automation stack because it's a complicated stack. It's a simplified stack because most of it is vertically integrated right within Gluware. And then in the fourth bullet there, it's around patented, award-winning capabilities. We have numerous patents on our technology. We continue to roll in several awards. You can hit our website and see a bunch of the recent industry awards that we've been receiving, especially since the 4.0 major release. And then really, we keep rolling out new application support with the latest being Network RPA. So let's jump again right into Network RPA from a more tactical or lower layer view. One of the first key capabilities you're going to see, there's three main components of Gluware Network RPA. And I do want to point out that Network RPA is not a traditional RPA product like Automation Anywhere or UiPath. Those are kind of more focused on automating, back-end processes and screen scraping and sitting on top of software systems. Gluware Network RPA is focused on the network, or more accurately, I should say the infrastructure, because the network kind of is more expansive than just, let's say, your route switch kind of domain today. So it is not in that realm, but it is enabling many of the same things RPA does, which is end-to-end process automation. It's no code, it's drag and drop at, with the building of the things that you need to do in your set. And that with Gluware's native capability, you have the ability to create public or private workflows. It has integrated role-based access control. It has support for complex rules and logic, like your if-then type of logic associated with that. You have integrated annotations where you can embed comments around things you're doing. So this really makes automation and these workflows that you build, it really opens them up and makes them available to the rest of the team. One of the key problems with automation and even playbooks or scripts is that really it's only the person that wrote them or built them understands how they operate. With Gluware Network RPA, you can very clearly and easily see how they operate. And with annotations, you can understand any builders what they were intending as they built this out. So that's important as well. I mentioned earlier that, built in the NetDevOps mindset, when you're building a workflow, you build it in essentially a test phase. and you move through validation, and then you can promote it from test into production. And then once it goes into production, you would then not edit it any further. You could clone it and make another variant of it, but essentially Gluware is looking at kind of trying to help you enforce the process of things as they move through in development, in test, and in production, the way you would in a CI/CD type of pipeline or approach. The second biggest component, when I mentioned the three big ones, one being workflow editor, is the Network RPA workflow library. Here's where you can save, clone, you can change your role-based access controls. You can see even this screenshot, you might not be able to see it well, but you have workflows in different state from draft to test to production. And if they're in draft or test, you can go back in and audit them. And you have the visibility of maintaining and controlling, or really kind of curating your own workflows. And from here, you can run them. You can enable them to be triggered externally. We'll look at that in a few demonstrations where there's a native API wrapper with the Glue API capability, where you can query through API what workflows are available, and you can run those workflows, and you can pull information about those workflows. So we'll see that. Then the third kind of main component of Gluware Network RPA is the activity view. And the activity view is you can see everything running. You can see how if it ran to completion, if you had any failures. If you do have any failures, or even if you're looking at something completed, you have summary level logging, and then you can navigate into deep device level logging, and you have a lot of stats. And you can enable tasks to give you different notifications that maybe something failed, but you don't determine it to be a failure. Maybe it was just like a nice to have pre-check. You can determine if that is just informational or a minor or a major. You may only want to determine a workflow has failed if you have something deemed to be a critical error. So there's also controls in that as you look at different workflows and the running, and if they ran to completion or not. And so again, very, very deep level view of the operational state and the logging and the troubleshooting. And then with those results, you can jump back and edit and move through that process of develop, test, deploy, monitor in the CI/CD pipeline. So while Gluware 4.3, the big rock of the release is the new Network RPA, which is a new app and the suite of applications that we offer. 4.3 also introduces over 70 additional features and many fixes. So I encourage you to check out the release notes and look at the full list, but there's capabilities introduced across pretty much all of the applications with Device Manager, Drift and Audit, and OS Manager. And this is where we're just, incrementing on things that we've been wanting to improve or enhance, or we get feedback from customers. Like in your device view on Device Manager, you now can filter by CVE IDs. CVEs are those vulnerabilities disclosed by NIST. We also, expose the advisory titles and the Cisco bug IDs. As part of the deep discovery Gluware is doing, we're looking at switch port, counts, and those counts are not only available in the reporting, but now those are displayed in your Device Manager details in the Explorer grid. And Drift and Audit, numerous enhancements. Many of you know that audit was kind of completely, revamped in our 4.2 release. We had really significant enhancements to the audit app, and we've continued to roll out additional enhancements around bundling 3 different types of reports. You can have a requirement for a field to be empty in a configuration. You can have audit rule conditionals supporting regex on the latest and default snapshot values. So that's, which image you're looking at as you're auditing either a latest snapshot or the default snapshot, which is your so-called golden config, which you're expecting on that device. Across OS Manager, now that your file server status is available directly in OS Manager, so you don't have to kind of navigate over to a different view to understand that the health of the file server. There's also image validation with the Cisco API is configurable. And even if, let's say you don't want to perform that image validation, you can actually override that as well. So again, I encourage you to look at the release notes and check out that full list. One last summary slide here. Gluware is automation and orchestration. So we're kind of in the middle when we think about the management plane and the underlying network plane. One thing I want to point out here is with the introduction of Gluware Network RPA, Gluware is now taking a bigger role in orchestrating third-party components. This is largely driven through StackStorm here in this 4.3 release, and StackStorm has an Ansible pack. So pretty much anything StackStorm can do or Ansible can do, Gluware can now orchestrate that as part of your overall automation. When you think southbound of what Gluware is able to automate and orchestrate, it's really broken for us and broken down into three main categories. Your traditional infrastructure, which we call like your CLI-driven infrastructure. This could be across your route switch, your WAN, your LAN, your campus, your data center. Moving into the second category here, this is around API-driven infrastructure. So Gluware in the past has introduced a bunch of capability here, and we continue to expand it. But this is like Cisco ACI in the data center, Meraki as maybe your branch solution, Cisco SD-WAN, which is the Viptela acquisition, maybe that's your WAN strategy, and others like F5. And then into the third category is everybody's moving to cloud. And so Gluware can automate your clouds directly natively through API. We also have an integration with Terraform, which is extremely powerful because we've leveraged our config modeling to become an application layer on top of Terraform, which is already declarative and idempotent for cloud. And so now through Terraform, we can automate and spin up, full VPCs or infrastructure in the cloud through that. And one of the demos you're going to see is through StackStorm and their AWS pack, we can automate the clouds through StackStorm as well. On the northbound side, it's really about what else is existing in your management plane. ServiceNow is an ITSM. We'll take a look at a demo with that. You might be using Infoblocks for your IPAM. You might have code repositories like Git or Bitbucket or others. You might be using an external source of truth like Netbox, or maybe bug management with Jira or FogBugs. And all of these things can be integrated with Gluware as well. So again, this is either done through native API, or now we're largely working on and helping customers in the process automation using Gluware Network RPA moving forward. So let's jump into the final slide here, which is the 7 transformational benefits of using Network RPA. So let's get started with the first one here, which I mentioned already. And this is as senior leaders are paying attention to what Gartner is saying, they're saying hyper automation is really a key strategy that enterprises must be leveraging and moving towards. And so with Network RPA delivering process automation for your network infrastructure, we're moving you even faster on this curve of hyper automation. So it is really a method or a mechanism with our packaged apps and our no-code solutions to move you towards a more robust strategy for hyper automation. So again, I encourage you to take a look at Gartner's work on this topic and see how Gluware ticks a lot of the boxes to move you on this path. The next big transformational benefit is around enhancing security. So security really comes in many forms, and Gluware I wouldn't say is like a pure play in terms of being, like a firewall or rule automator or something like that. But Gluware has broad capabilities around security rule management and router switchers, firewall, and others. You can implement, configurations around security, like your authentication or your, key management and others. And really with security, it's about having processes to deal with when there is a breach or when there's something detected that you need to take an automated response for. And that was pretty exciting for us with the ONUG Spring event. We partnered up with the CSNF working group, and we're showcasing Network RPA, enabling event-driven automated response. So we're saying if there's a breach, there's going to be an API call that triggers a workflow, and it's going to perform an automated response. And so this is something you really want to look at in that, what you have in your infrastructure and in your automation where you can enable an event-driven and automated response when things happen related to security. So we're going to have a use case on that. Number 3 here is around Gluware's to a large degree pre-built with the automation suite, and it's high performing, meaning that it is highly scalable to work right out of the box and deliver for you an automated solution to get you going very quickly. So where the transformational benefit comes into play here is that there's no coding required, there's no programming skill sets required. Your time to automate goes down significantly using Gluware versus any other approach. And now with Network RPA, not just time to automate tasks, but time to automate end-to-end processes. So that is huge in terms of the ROI you can get to in a very consolidated amount of time with your network engineering and operational staff that are not programmers. Number 4 here is around this notion of a process. So this one calls it out more distinctly in that when you think of automation, often it's task, 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 task. And really what process automation is automating multiple tasks to get a complete operational state done, be it a troubleshooting process, be it a move, add, or change, be it a validation, be it a security response or a response to a change in what you need from a degraded application, and really just being able to implement and orchestrate a multi-step automated workflow. And that's probably the key component of, if you had to say in what sentence, one sentence what Network RPA delivers is that the no-code building of multi-step automated workflow processes. So it's very, very powerful. What are we on here? 5? Multi-vendor architecture with over 40 integrations. So this builds off the whole kind of the platform of Gluware. We continue to add vendor support and capabilities. So you have over 40 integrated vendors that we support that we're declarative, idempotent, and that we have this suite of applications. So when you add up these things together, especially with Network RPA, you get a tremendous ability to consolidate, meaning you don't have to use many different forms or systems. I do this manually. I have a script for that. I have a playbook for that. I use a legacy system like an HPNA or a NetMRI or some other legacy component that you're using a little bit, but it doesn't do everything you need anymore. You get to really consolidate and potentially completely remove out those legacy solutions, remove and reduce all those manual steps, and stop having to maintain all those manual playbooks and scripts. So you get the consolidation, but a key component of that is that Gluware is built for tremendous scale and reliability. So when we have, some of the largest credit card companies in the world or some of the largest banks and insurance companies relying on Gluware and largest pharmaceuticals in the world, they are relying on Gluware for global operations and making changes at scale with reliability. And I think that's a really key component, because what you don't want to do is have, an automation failure when you kind of consider, what that could do to your enterprise and the uptime and the availability. So the next one here is around enabling NetDevOps. So I've talked quite a bit about this, and I do want to refer back to, GigaOM, Gartner, EMA, IDC. In fact, IDC has a great spotlight paper coming out on Gluware. I believe it's just becoming available, so check gluware.com or look to your Gluware resources to get that paper. But this is around leveraging the best of DevOps, which is a CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous development pipeline, and being on a track to really step and repeat automation and continue to iterate, where it's this nonstop process of build, test, deploy, operate, monitor, and then you do it again. And you keep doing this, and you're building out and you're incrementing, and you're making your automation better and better and have more and more coverage across what you're doing. And it can be the little things. And I'm going to show you a couple examples of little things you can do to automate processes you might be doing manually, or it can be really big initiatives like automated security response. So we'll take a look at some of those. The last one here, I believe it's the last one, is around something tremendously important in highly regulated industries, is around maintaining compliance. Compliance to third-party, PCI DSS or HIPAA these regulatory requirements are really key in terms of the responsibility that network operations, network engineering has as a part of what they're tasked with. So being able to take every automated process and implement an audit with it, or ensuring or monitoring your network for change through drift, or controlling policies, config policies through config modeling, and then taking all of those things together with Network RPA, where you could implement a drift, and if something drifted, automatically remediate, and then even automate a audit to ensure at the end of that process, everything is still compliant. And we're going to look at how Network RPA ties all that together. So with that, we'll wrap up this portion of the introduction, and we'll move into the live demonstrations. To set up this first demonstration, we're going to take a quick look at the basics around Network RPA, how you build, test, deploy, and monitor process automation. And so what that kind of looks like when you're using the app is this, again, it's a NetDevOps approach where you're going to build, you're going to execute a test and verification that it's working. You can deploy, meaning you can deploy to production, or you could actually deploy to test and keep it in test if you're still planning on tuning or tweaking it. And then as you're operating it, you're looking at the logs and making sure it's executing properly. And then you're monitoring it. You're in the phase where you're running it, monitoring it, and see if you're getting the expected results time after time of running it, and then potentially tweaking and repeating the cycle. So you may iterate on the automation you're working on through, let's say, cloning a production workflow back to draft and then iterating, or maybe you're adding layers or steps, and we're going to take a look at, I would say, a lot of this in the very first demo. So let's switch over to the application here, get signed in, and as you land in Gluware, you're gonna, this is the dashboard. This is the device manager view. You could be looking at your dashboard. This is kind of the standard Gluware app login and view. Let's say, if we look at my inventory, I'm sitting here with my test inventory. And what you're going to see new for Network RPA is on your left-hand nav, you're going to see the new Network RPA logo and app name. And you're typically going to be navigating into your workflow library if you're going to be potentially creating and curating your existing workflows. So let's take a look at, if you're going to kind of start from scratch, what that looks like. You're going to come up and execute a new workflow. Call this webinar demo and demo. And then next, you're going to assign it as public or private. If you assign it as public, then other users in your org and the kind of children orgs will have visibility of this workflow. And then you can see the 5 different levels of role-based access control as well. So a little bit of control there in terms of who can see it and run it as well. So let's move on to next. So now when the workflow name is essentially named and created, you're starting off with the drag and drop canvas. And what we're going to do in a kind of first getting started demo with Gluware, we're going to kind of automate the automation as I talked about. So when you think of the Gluware application suite, along the left-hand side, you have Device Manager and Drift and Audit, OS Manager, Config Modeling. Previously or continually, you're going to be going into these applications and doing various automations. Now at the Network RPA level, you can think about kind of orchestrating those or stringing actions from each app into an end-to-end workflow. And so what that looks like from Device Manager, you're usually doing an action where you're selecting or filtering your devices. So I'll just drag and drop that in. You drag and drop it in. And some of the tasks require configuration. So that particular device, that task does require configuration, and we'll get to that. And then let's look at drift and audit. If I was going to be doing a drift, I would be first probably capturing the current config, because I want to drift off the current config. And then I may want to execute a snapshot comparison. And so that's what this next task is. So you can see, with Gluware, the workflow is very much of choose your tasks, drag and drop them into your workflow, and then you can click in and edit them. When you're clicking in and editing them, you have a dialog here where you can apply various things like filters or a form fill to capture user input. So in this example here around filter, I can add a rule for I'm gonna use variable name. So the name contains Cisco, And so this is a filter. So this will filter on any devices that have the name Cisco, and it'll apply that. So that's all I would need to do. You can see there's numerous other things you could look at. You could look at advisories, you can look at operational state, you can look at all kinds of things to filter your device list, and I just click save here. So that's literally as simple as it is to build out a workflow without any programming. It's basically understanding what you want to do from the tasks you have, drag and drop them in, configure them, and then you can get into logical parameters and things like that. So what I'm going to do is, just for, let's say, hygiene, I will go ahead and save this workflow because I may want to come back to it. And I'm going to navigate into my navigate into my workflow library. So from my workflow library, what I want to do is, instead of kind of building this all out manually and seeing every point and click, we're going to go ahead and start editing a workflow that already exists, which is a bit more complicated. It would take a couple minutes to build out, but instead of showing you every drag and drop and click, I'm going to just show you real quickly what's built out. So I'm filtering on name contains Cisco, as I showed you before. And then I'm executing a capture, I'm executing a compare, then I'm layering in some business logic here, right? So I'm doing an if then. If the device property, and I have a rule, if config drifted equals no, I'm going to continue on this path here. And then there's an else. So the else logic, it goes into this path. So if config drifted is a no, it's going to go this way. If it has drifted, it's going to go this way. I'm going to have an email notification, and then I'm going to hit a provision device, which will remediate, and then it will come down here to run an audit policy. If I click into this task, I'm running my Cisco standard config audit. That just happens to be one of the audits that I have in my underlying config drift and audit. After it runs the audit policy, I see another logical operator. If audit violation count is, if it equals 0, meaning no violations, I continue on this good path. Otherwise, I have, even after configuring and potentially remediating, if I have violations, I'll come over here and send an email saying, although I've drifted and remediated potentially, I got to this point, I audited, and I still had an audit violation, so I'm going to notify the user to, potentially take a manual intervention, or kind of basically say, hey, there's a notification that there's an audit, you need to go take a look and dig deeper into this. So again, this is like, I can zoom in, zoom out of this this template area, this workflow area. You have other here where you can close out or maximize that screen here. You can look at your annotations. You can click this button to see the entire thing on the screen. You can zoom in, zoom out via here, and you can also look at the validation here as well. So let's take this a step further and move into validation. So after we've done any edits, we go ahead and we validate. This is successful. So now I can move from a draft to a test state. If I'm going to run the test, one very important thing to remember is that now in your device properties, you have a new label for them, is if they're test or production, or you can label them as both test and production. If you have devices like in a test bed and you're emulating both test and production, you'd probably want to put that dual label on them. So with this, I'm going to go ahead and execute a test of this workflow and say it's going to execute. And when it executes, I'm going to go to the activity view. So in my intro, I was talking about 3 main views. You have your library, which we went to first. Then we went into the workflow editor, which you saw the drag and drop canvas. Now here we are in the workflow activity. Now I can dive into the log and see what's happening here. I also see from a task standpoint, as Gluware executes each task, I see the progress here and how long it took. I also can navigate into the targets, and I can see that based on my filter, I filtered for 5 devices from my 20 in my test bed that have the name Cisco in the list. So there is a benefit of using filters. It will dynamically filter for that particular criteria and then dynamically change your list. If I had to select devices, it would require a manual intervention to go in and select your devices. And so when this is running here, I can also click right all the way into the interaction with the device. So since Gluware is using our native integration and our support, in this case for Cisco iOS, you can see everything Gluware is doing at the CLI level, and get down into the details if there's anything unexpected that occurs. So let's get back into my task view here, and I can see that it looks like there's a provisioning action happening. So there is likely, based on my logic, there is a remediation that had to occur. I can look at that and see that these two devices had to be remediated based on my condition of drift. So I can exit out of that. And then it finished that, it completed an audit, and then executed completion of the task. So with that, since the main notification you see here is, obviously I get a lot of feedback here with exactly what happened from my audit, but I can also navigate into my email to see if I got those notifications. So let me do that real quick. And I can see here I did get the email that is notifying me that there was drift detected and remediated on these guys. I do see a small error here saying an invalid variable reference, so I can go ahead and clean that up in my workflow as I progress. Okay, so with that being done here, and just to look at that real quick, I can navigate back to my workflow library. Here's that workflow is still in a test state, so I can go back in and edit it. And if I look at my email tasks here, if I navigate in, so you can see here I have a misspelling on my variable. This variable is called workflow name, so I want to edit that and save it. And these are two, in this particular task, the send email, I'm using two known variables in the system. One is the variable called the workflow name, so it'll pull in whatever you've named your workflow into the subject line of the email. And then I'm pulling in a variable called device name. So we're going to loop for each device that the filter or task requires, and we're gonna say, you know, drift was remediated and detected. So, or detected and remediated here. So I hit save here. I want to just quickly see if I have that error. No, I don't have that error here. So I had a small misspelling in my email, and through testing of the workflow, I was able to see that. And let me just look at this final one. And this final one, I didn't use the workflow variable. I just said there was an audit violation. So that would be okay as well. So I can hit cancel. And so this is the process of building a workflow in Gluware Network RPA and then executing it through draft phase, then test phase. And if I'm happy with this workflow and I now want it to be used, let's say, time and time again, and I'm not going to be kind of continually editing or tweaking it, from the validation, I hit save. And then from validation, I'm getting my notification here, from validation library, I can move it to production if I require. So let's move on to the next use case. In this next use case, we're going to have a little bit of fun in the fact that we're going to be using StackStorm and leveraging StackStorm for some notification. In this case, we're going to be doing notification with both Jira, a commonly used workflow management system folks use, like Gluware, we use it heavily, and Slack. We also use Slack very heavily. So what we're going to look at in this use case is something that we had frequently gotten requests or requirements about, which is in Gluware Device Manager, you can configure API access to Cisco for we pull numerous things, but one of the things we pull is the Cisco advisories, the PCerts, the Cisco well-known issues or disclosures that they have, as well as API connectivity to NIST, which is multi-vendor vulnerabilities known as CVEs. So underlying our Gluware Device Manager is doing that. So we have API integration there. And then what we're going to see with the workflow is that we're going to use a workflow where, you know, Gluware is looking at your underlying inventory. And then what we're able to do is do a filter using Device Manager task. If any advisory, if there's greater than one advisory, we want to execute notifications. So in this case, we're going to be doing notifications with both Jira, opening an issue, and Slack sending a notification. So with that short intro, let's switch back over to Gluware and take a look at that one. So I will go back to my workflow library here. And you know, if I had a big long list here, which I do, I could search on things that I know there's keywords, like I have Jira in the name of that particular workflow, so I can filter my list here to find that guy. So here it is here. Let's actually go back into edit. And what we're going to see here is that, again, we're filtering our devices, and we're filtering for, in this case, again, we're pre-filtering for my Cisco devices. Then we're executing a logical operator. Now we're saying if critical advisories, which encompass both Cisco and NIST, is greater or equal to 1. So basically, if there are any advisories, I want to know about it. So if I want to know about it, I'm going to, number one, I'm going to create an issue in Jira. So this is through the StackStorm integration, and I'll talk about that in a minute here. But basically here on the project demo, I'm adding this network devices have critical advisories, and I'll just note webinar demo. Okay, and I'll hit save. And then I have a second StackStorm task, which is post a message. So I'm posting in a channel I have created called N-RPA for Network RPA. And if I look at the task, Gluware workflow ran and devices have critical advisories. So I'll also do something here and say webinar demo, save. So now you can see another flow here, and this is a real world case because let's say normally in what you're doing in your daily activities with Gluware is you're navigating in Device Manager and you're looking at stats and then making decisions. Well, now you can have it do it for you and bring your attention to you when you need to be notified, right? So this is again like a filter and a notification that critical advisories exist. So let's validate it. Let's save our changes. Let's validate and run a test, execute. And when I execute a workflow, I go to the activity view. So I can see here, it was filtered. This thing ran in 6 seconds. Again, because Gluware is running from the database this time. We're not having to go, we're already talking to the other external APIs on a regular basis. And we didn't have to go and pull the inventory. We already have it in the database. So it runs extremely quickly. We talk to Jira, through StackStorm, we talk to Jira and we talk to Slack. So let's look at that. Here's my Jira instance here, my demo board. If I scroll down here, I can see Gluware workflows, critical advisories were detected. And if I click into this, I can see network devices have critical advisories. And this is from my webinar demo. So you can see that propagated through there. Also, I will navigate into my Slack channel, and I have a channel dedicated here called N-RPA, and I can see here at the current timestamp, you can see my machine time, 226 here, 225, a Gluware workflow ran, and devices have critical advisories, and it has the dash webinars demo. So there we see the Slack notification. So let's take this one step further here and extend this demo. Because back in my workflow library, this demo is now in test state. So let's just say that with any of these workflows, I wanted to move from running them manually, and certainly I can schedule them, but let's say I wanted it triggered. Let's say I had some external case where I want this workflow to be triggered via API. So to demonstrate that, I'm going to switch over to a desktop app called Advanced REST Client. You could use Postman, really you could use anything you want. And the other thing to mention is that, in your Gluware instance, if you take your Gluware instance and you just put API-docs and close your bracket, you can pull up your doc on workflows, your API documentation, and you can see the various things that you can do around getting your workflows and running your workflows. So let's look at Arc here, and here we have a get. What I'm gonna do here is use the credential of the user I'm using, and I'm getting the workflows. So I'm gonna go ahead and execute that, and it comes back with a response of 200 OK, and then in the body of it, you can see the JSON structure that has all of the workflows that have been created and run. So, all right, so we have it there. And now I can also run a workflow. So what I want to do here is just, I want to find the ID, which is like this one here. This is the ID of a workflow. And I just want to find the ID of a workflow of the one that I want to use here. So this particular workflow was called Vulnerabilities with Jira Slack Webinar Demo. So back in Arc, I can identify that particular workflow through the get here. Let me actually maximize this so I can see it better. So in that get, you're seeing a lot of detail. You're seeing the creation of the workflow anytime that workflow was changed or edited, like draft, test, and when the workflow was run with a timestamp, and then anytime it was changed. So looking at okay, so here I have the name I'm looking for, the vulnerabilities with Jira Slack, and if I just scroll up a little bit here, I can pull out the ID. So here's my ID. So I'm going to copy that. Now I'm going to execute the post, which is a run. What I'm executing here is an API call to execute the workflow again. So now I'm executing the workflow with the workflow ID and the keyword run here, and I execute it. And while I execute it from the API call, I can navigate back over to the UI instance. And here I can see the workflow was run again, and this time triggered by the API call. So again, you can run it manually, or you can run it by an API call. And that just demonstrates that if you want to externally trigger via an API call, which we demonstrated in multiple ONUG examples, that is available as well. For the last demonstration here, we're going to take a look at a more, let's say, somewhat complicated, in that this was a demonstration we leveraged for ONUG with the CSNF, the Cloud Security Notification Framework. And really, it's the premise of an external trigger. In the case of the CSNF demonstration, we integrated an API call with Azure Sentinel. So the CSNF framework determined there was a threat on the network, a security vulnerability. And as a response to that, Azure Sentinel introduced an API call, like I just demonstrated, to trigger Gluware. And in the Gluware side, we ran a workflow that was the autonomic response, which executed a drift, which you've seen with remediation, and an audit on the network. But it also did something very interesting. Using a StackStorm task, we're able to update an AWS ACL. And then along with it, we wrapped another component in, which is when you make a change to a system that, let's say you're not declarative, you don't have full closed loop, you're just basically leveraging something to make a change, you want to be able to validate the change too. So we decided to wrap and also include Ansible playbooks as a validation step, also showcasing Gluware can orchestrate Ansible through StackStorm. So, we're kind of leveraging multiple integrations there. All right, for this demonstration, I'm going to get signed into my Gluware instance in my admin setting here, my admin credentials, and navigate into Network RPA workflow library. So, and as mentioned, what I wanted to do was show that automated security response demo. So I can see it here, automated security response demo, and we're going to go back in to edit this guy. As we look at what this particular workflow does, is a lot of repeat of what you've seen before in previous demos. I'm going to filter the targets, I'm going to capture config. So I'm going to run the kind of the standard things we do in terms of device management, drift, and look at if drift occurred, remediate, because there's been, in this case, it's being triggered by a security issue or violation. I'm gonna run an audit policy with notification. But here's where some of the new stuff comes in terms of, again, building out and layering in your playbook. I'm going to be testing and orchestrating StackStorm to call Ansible playbooks. So I have an Ansible task here, which is calling a service status playbook for me. And then I am executing a AWS task, which is logging into my account, and I'm passing in the bad actor, the IP address, to block. So I'm editing an ACL entry, and then I'm doing a post validation to ensure, so there's a pre-test, a change, and a post-test. So the Ansible playbooks are kind of wrapping around the change on the AWS side. And if I just kind of quickly navigate back over to my AWS view, what I want to quickly show you is to simulate this type of an environment or test. I have two EC2 instances running in my VPC, one emulating the public side, one emulating the private side or the target application. If I navigate again back to my home here, from a network security side, I'm implementing network ACLs, and I have a network ACL here associated with my application that is pretty much the standard. So it's defaults here, and so the whole premise here is there's a bad actor. I'm going to be dynamically updating an ACL to take action on it. So let's jump back to the workflow and go ahead and kick this off. So I'm going to validate it. And I'm going to run it, and I'm going to execute. And as it executes, I'll go to my activity view and I can see what's happening. And so while this one takes a little longer to run, I did want to take a minute and navigate into my StackStorm instance and just show you that from a PAX perspective, again, now Gluware is automating or orchestrating StackStorm. So we have the StackStorm instance here, and the packs that I have installed are Ansible, which I'm using, AWS I'm using. You've seen Jira, you've seen Service. We didn't show ServiceNow yet, but I could demonstrate that. We've shown Slack, and so these are packs from StackStorm we're leveraging, and there's many more available here. You can check out the StackStorm exchange for all of that. Now, when I go to my history, this is kind of cool because this is where I can see when it gets to the point where I'm running a StackStorm action or activity, which I can see here. I'm provisioning devices, so I did not get to the point yet where I'm doing that component of it. There has been a drift occurred, so there's a provisioning task that's happening, so that's in progress now. When that completes, I'll move on towards my integration with Ansible and StackStorm, sorry. But as you can see from this previous one run from, I get to see all the history that Gluware is calling through StackStorm. So as that StackStorm tasks, as those things are kicked off, I will see those here. And I can see that the playbook is now, the Ansible playbook is run, and those tasks are running. So as I navigate back into my Slack, and I refresh this view here, I can see the Ansible playbook ran, and I could, here's this other, if I check the live output, this was the pre-test. So in the pre-test, I was able to ping through with this address, and I had no issues. So I'm kind of emulating testing of this bad actor. So if I go back to my StackStorm event, now we make the AWS change, and you can see here I push the change to edit that entry. And now if I navigate into my task, I can see here that same ping test executed with an Ansible playbook, there's 0 success. So effectively I can say using a ping test that my change on my VPC of my ACL, network ACL was successful. So if I navigate back into my let me get back into the right view here. So here was that inbound access list. If I just refresh this view here, I can see here now there is a new rule that has been applied. So this is just an example where we're taking it a step further here. We're doing numerous things. We're automating through the third-party StackStorm. We're leveraging Ansible playbooks, which a lot of our customers have that they want to essentially orchestrate or incorporate with various Gluware activity. And we're making in this case, it could be a triggered. We ran it manually, but this could be a triggered. We showed you the API side of the triggered security response to then execute something like a dynamic ACL change. The last piece of what we want to just quickly touch on with Gluware is if I go back into my library, the last one I'll kind of quickly talk to is that if I execute a new workflow here, and I'll just call it webinar 2 test. I'll keep this one private just for simplicity and speed. As we get in here, there's a whole nother category of workflows that you can execute and of tasks that you can create and run, and they are around through Gluware Lab. So using Gluware Lab as a low-code environment, you can build out custom tasks. In this case, we did this demonstration for Networking Field Day. We don't have time to repeat it now in this webinar, but if you want to see it, I suggest you check out NFD 28, where we went and built, essentially we have API integration with ServiceNow. We built a specific task in Lab that we wanted, and we published it into Gluware Network RPA here, and then you have a drag and drop task that you can drag and drop in, and this happens to be a ServiceNow task where I could specify my input and output variables for that task to work it. But that's really the final component of this webinar and getting to that. And again, that particular topic is fairly lengthy in and of its own, so I do ask that you go and watch that on Networking Field Day. So with that concludes this Gluware webinar. We hope you enjoyed the information about the new Gluware 4.3 release, and especially Network RPA. It is available now. It's been available since we went GA in the second week of May. If you'd like to learn more, check out Gluware.com. From there, you can request free access to Gluware. You can take a test drive, which is a fully virtual environment we set up. You just need some time to kick the tires. And you can request a demo. If you really want to interact with us, share your use cases, let us know what problems you're trying to solve. We would love to jump in and get engaged with you. And you can always reach us at sales@gluware.com. Again, thank you for your time and interest in Gluware.